Hi, everyone. This is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Life. I apologize for the interruption of the broadcast that we just had. I don't know if that has to deal with the local thunderstorm that's going on and the connections that we have today um, through Comcast, believe it or not. So we won't get there. But let's start. Well, we're not going to start over again. The feed is there, so we're just going to pick up from where we were actually with our introductions of. Let me just give an introduction again to Moreno Aguiari, who is founder of foundation Inspired Aviation Foundation. He's moved here 20 years ago from Milan, Italy, and has found a passion in flying, certainly in the World War II veterans even area. So why don't you, let's start with you telling us a little bit more again about yourself, not to repeat things, but give us a little bit more explanation about
Sure.
yourself, and
Yeah.
then we'll go right
Real,
into it.
real quick, as I was mentioning, came to the US to become a pilot, and then the goal was to go back in Italy, and things didn't go as planned. Been here for 20 years now, and as far as my passion for aviation comes from both my uncle and my dad, who were in the Italian Air Force, and my passion for World War II came from talking to both my grandfathers who both fought in World War II, and always been a history buff in general, and obviously combining World War II aviation and my passion for history. Naturally, I fell into following and researching World War II aviation. Although I really like any era of aviation, but World War II it's very fascinating. Has a lot of great stories, and we are still able to meet veterans for World War II. So you were asking me about the NAS Atlanta archives.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
the NAS Atlanta archives are a project of Inspire Aviation Foundation. So, if you don't mind, allow me to explain what the Inspire Aviation Foundation is. Essentially, we
Sure.
are a 501c3 no profit dedicated to the goal of bringing a world class air and space museum and educational campus at the Peachtree-DeKalb Airport, or as we call it, PDK, not that far from here. So we
Mm-hmm.
set up this foundation to essentially build an aerospace museum and an educational campus at PDK. Because of COVID-19, things obviously slowed down a little bit. So we wanted to act quick in order to not avoid to go unnoticed and to keep the momentum going. So I had a previous relationship with this group called NAS Atlanta Reunion Group, which is a group of uh, veterans who served at NAS Atlanta. NAS Atlanta, for some of your listeners might know or might not know, um, we know the last base being in Marietta at Dobbins Air Force Base. That's the
Right.
last location of NAS Atlanta, which I believe was closed down in 2009. But NAS Atlanta started here at PDK, Peachtree-DeKalb Airport, in 1941. Essentially, PDK was a NAS Atlanta Naval Air Station training pilots essentially to go to combat. And this group has been meeting, essentially, this veteran group has been meeting since 1960 and has been collecting artifacts, photos, logbooks, newspapers, all kind of material from 1960, until recent years. And it was about 5 years ago that I met a gentleman named Will Tate. I organized an event called the Atlanta Warbler Weekend at PDK. It was held in September. We brought in a bunch of World War II airplanes, offer rides to the public, and we had educational programs, educational displays. And this gentleman came up to me, and we had an airplane called Corsair, FG-1D Corsair, the airplane with the bent wings, and there was a famous TV show called Baba Black Sheep back
Right. I
uh,
remember
back
that.
back in
Sure.
the days. And he
Yeah.
goes, this airplane was based here at in Chambly in 1950. I said, really, sir? How do you know? And he goes, well, I grew up here in Chambly. I was a kid that was jumping the fence and was going to play with the airplanes when I was little younger than my son was next to me, a little younger than your son. So we started talking, went back and forth. I found out he was the president of the NAS Atlanta Reunion Group. We became good friends, and he lives in Pensacola. We went back and forth until essentially he knew. I told him about the museum, the goal of the museum, and until these guys are getting very old, they don't have the energy really to do these reunions again. So I helped them out, put up a reunion 3 years ago, and I'm actually going to help them again this year. And in return, they essentially asked me, "Look, we are getting old, we are getting tired. We want the history of NAS Atlanta to continue. Would you guys be interested in taking over the archives?" And for me, it was like, absolutely. I mean, this is great. So essentially, they donated the archives to the foundation, and obviously as part of the museum, our job is to preserve history in the best ways as possible. And all these pictures were essentially they are 70, 75 years old. I have things like the original drawings of the bay, blueprint of the bays. That it's paper and obviously very fragile. So what we did in order to start moving the first steps towards our educational mission with the foundation and the museum, we decided to start a small fundraising campaign to preserve the archives. And how we do that, because all these photos are paper and printed material, in their very large format, we decided to essentially hire a photographer with a high resolution camera, and he essentially photographed all the archives with a vertical. He's got a beautiful vertical rig. The camera is mounted vertically, and shots pictures at 74, 80 megabyte or gigabyte resolution. I mean, huge files. So the goal is to preserve the archives digitally, but then the digital material will be turned into an exhibit once we have the museum built. And we started about a month ago, and I was very surprised with the positive feedback. We were able to reach our goal. And in fact, the photos now are digitized. Next week, I'm going to pick them up and reorganize them again. So the next step would be possibly creating a book with this material, a book about NAS Atlanta. And other interesting fact of Peachtree-DeKalb Airport, before World War II, it used to be World War I. It used to be called Camp Gordon. So soldiers who fought in World War I trained in PDK. So there is a lot of history in Chambly and PDK in particular. Yes.
So that sounds like that would be a great place for the museum, actually, then, right?
Yeah. I mean, the museum is set to be on runway 27, which is now not open. It's been closed for about 10 years. And so we already have the land. We already have, we know where it's going to be, that was the most important thing, making sure to have a land to build a museum, because you can have the best project, the best ideas, but if you don't have a place to put it, it's never going to happen. Good thing is that the airport director, Mario Evans, is one of our board of directors. He loves the idea. He has a vision for PDK to be more than just an airport, more than just a place for people to really land and take off with airplanes. And the museum fits in his master plan, really creating a place for economic development and for the community. So the museum fits perfectly.
Yeah, and I personally like the idea of having a air and space museum.
Sure.
I mean, because it's not just airplanes then, right? I mean, is the mission to also handle anything that flies?
Absolutely. We want to tell the story of, a flight from, the Wright brothers. It happens that at PDK, we have a company, the company I work for actually, Epps Aviation. And Ben T. Epps was the first man who flew in Georgia. So, and there is actually a replica of his plane in the hangar where we work. So it happens that Mr. Epps, his son, is still alive and big supporter of the museum. He's 86 years old, and his father was the first man who flew in Georgia. So there is a lot of history at definitely PDK. So it's centrally located. the goal is really to build an experience for visitors that is as dynamic and inspirational in the fields of aviation and space travel. So we are not envisioning, I guess, your old school aviation museums where you have your airplane and a sign, read the sign. This is an F-16, whatever. That's not dynamic. That's not inspirational. So we're really thinking outside the box here. We are talking to Disney Imagineers. Disney Imagineers are actually those guys who build the theme parks for Disney. So we really want to provide an experience that goes beyond your box full of airplanes. And yes.
No, I'm personally excited by it. I mean, I'm a SpaceX Elon Musk fan. Most people don't even know that in the state of Georgia we have a spaceport in Camden
Correct.
County on the coast, and they're trying to be. And I don't know if it was Bezos or one of these private companies actually has leased out that spaceport, I think, or part of it.
Well, one thing that people don't know that Georgia is number one state in business has been the number one state in business for the past 5 years, but it's number 3 in aerospace. So people think, oh, we have Delta, we have UPS, absolutely, but Georgia is a big player in the aerospace industry, which includes general aviation, space, and everything else. So our state is definitely a big player in aerospace. So that's why. We think that what we are going to do will make a difference and impact to the goal. It's very simple, Rico. We would like to get a little Johnny who's loves airplanes or he doesn't know anything about airplanes yet. It comes through our doors, gets inspired, and becomes the next Mars explorer. And that's why we are, the project title is Atlanta Air and Space Museum, which might change to Georgia Air and Space Museum, but there is another important component attached to it, which is educational campus. In fact, when we mean education, we are not just meaning come to the museum, we'll tell you a story about that airplane. Absolutely. We're really talking about tangible education. In fact, the DeKalb County School District is our partner, and we are developing a master plan as classrooms within the museum premises, so students can come in and learn the STEM subjects related to aviation. And we are starting, going back to what I was saying earlier, we don't want to really lose the momentum because of COVID. We want to be active now. While we are developing with DeKalb County a syllabus for K-12 grades based on STEM aviation, and hopefully everything goes well, we're going to deploy it with the next school years, whatever happens to it. Obviously, it's going to be all digital, so we didn't plan for that. So we are actually now kind of adjusting as well. But the point is that, yes, it's an air and space museum, but we really want to focus on the educational side of things, and not just saying education because it sounds good, but because we want to really bring this little Johnny to the museum as a little child, and with the partnership with DeKalb County School District and hopefully Georgia Tech, we're going to accompany this little Johnny museum, high school, college, and we're already talking to companies that are interested in having R&D facility, research and development facility within our campus. So all of a sudden you have a path. You go from the museum all the way to hopefully get in the job market because of our work or our influence of being around our facility.
And I know that you're not doing it on purpose, but we want to make sure that people understand it's obviously not only John but Jane, and that
absolutely, right? Yeah.
We're talking about women in coding. We're talking about the history of women in NASA that have done terrific work. So being able to put that enthusiasm out there, especially in a time like now when people can learn online, where there are apps, where there's virtual reality, VR systems that can be used to a degree, right? My kids fly, they're playing games like War Thunder
Sure.
on Steam on a PC, and it's literally what you will see on a dashboard of a plane, and you're literally doing the same thing.
No,
Some
you're
of these
right.
kids,
It's Jim and Jane. Absolutely, no question about it. And um, in fact, one of our board members is, I'm a fan of this woman because she's super. Really, she's a C-130 pilot. Used to be a C-130, transport plane. She flies at Dobbins. She used to be a C-130 mechanic, then started working for Delta as a mechanic, decided to become a pilot, and now she's flying C-130s. She's a math teacher, and she has a degree in aerospace, and she just applied for the NASA astronaut program. And she's our board of director. I think she's 37, Latessa, and she's so absolutely. It's not only Jim, it's Jane as well. And I have two daughters, so I hope that what I'm doing will, in a way, influence them as well.
Sure. How old are your kids?
I have a 11. Rebecca is 11. Will be 12 in November. Jada is 8. Will be 9 in September. Little guy Morgan will be 6 tomorrow. In fact.
Wow. All right. Cool. 3 kids. That's right. And I have 3 kids also. They're all 16 and above, actually. So, but great age. Great time to be inspired, to get inspiration, right? Because they're all learning what they want to become at some point. Still young, right? But it's good to be inspired by the right people. And sometimes it's a matter of showing and experiencing rather than telling, right?
Yes, there is no question about it that, by living an experience, you learn more. And this idea comes from an experience I had about 8-9 years ago. I was in California, and I was visiting the mecca of World War II aviation called Plains of Fame in Chino, California. And I met a friend of mine with kids, I guess, like your age kids, 14, 15, 2 boys. And we walk inside the museum, and I was in awe. I mean, World War II planes that I always wanted to see. They actually are flying, so it's even better. And after 10 minutes, I heard these 2 kids telling their dad, "Dad, this is boring. Nothing moves. They're just signs. There is nothing interactive." And I said, what are you talking about, kids? This is awesome. And then it hit me. Of course, different generations. Now you got to immerse them. But even for us adults, if you think about it, cognitive process works the same at different speeds depending on the age. But if the process is the same, so if we are immersed into an experience, you really learn it at a different level. So that's really what we're trying to do. And that's why I mentioned the Disney Imagineers, because when you go to Disney, you have an experience. So the way we envision the museum is, yes, we want to have airplanes, but we are not going to focus necessarily on we need that specific airplane because broke the world record, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
We want to be able to use that airplane to tell a story and to bring an experience, an immersive experience. So, again, we're not going to be the old school box full of airplanes.
Well, this is, like I said, it's an exciting time because you have the ability to do that in a very interactive way. I mean, virtual reality allows for that, where you can actually, instead of, building something that has to stay that way for 10 years before you do another build out or something, you actually can adjust and do things on a quicker basis, right? And give an experience a little different. Exhibition, museum stuff. It's an interesting proposition because kids are interested at a different level, like you said. They want that interactiveness. Whereas adults like you and me, maybe we're cool with seeing the airplanes hanging or maybe flying or whatever. It might be a little different. Although I got to tell you, watching my son play War Thunder on the PC big screen in front of me, and I'm like, man, can I sit down and do that too? He's like, no, get away from me. But
well, I think also for us adults, Rico, you never know when you're gonna fall in love with a new passion. So
yes.
We definitely we want the kids. We are building this for the younger generation and the kids, but we also want the adults that had a dream of flying or had a dream of being around airplanes, but because of life, work, whatever happened, was never able to get around it. So that's the beauty of flying. It's really a really passionate thing, and some people have it since the beginning, since young children or young child like me, and other people discover it later in life. So that's why we think that really what we are trying to build here, it really will allow to attract and inspire different generations. So
I think that's exciting, but obviously the first steps are the baby steps, right? So the first step is to take care of the NSA archives that you have, and you're raising money to be able to preserve that and take care of that.
Yeah, we did, and again, that's something that we had there, but because of COVID, we were really preparing to put together a feasibility fundraising campaign and starting really to get out in the public. But obviously, the climate right now, it's not ideal. So we said, look, we have the archives. Why don't we do something with it? And I always, deep inside, I always knew that I wanted to digitize them. And I told to the board, I convinced them to let me try this campaign. And sure enough, it was well received. We had couple of articles in the medias, and the donations came in, and everyone told me, "Oh, nobody's going to give you money. It's tough times." Well, actually, we raised more than what we expected, because I think people understand what we're trying to do. So people might not have money for silly things, but I think they still have money to donate for important things. And these archives are really awesome, and you really. I know you have some pictures, so if you want, we can.
Actually, as we were talking before, it was expanding some of them.
Well, that's right there.
Here's one of the pictures.
Yeah, this is a 1945. This is again Peachtree-DeKalb Airport as it looked like in 1945. Believe it or not, without believe it or not, what's interesting is there are still buildings that I can see. It's really hard for me to describe in these pictures, but there are few buildings that are still existing right now, and they're still being used as hangars. And it's really fascinating, because the history buff that I am, I walk around the airport and I always find things that I recognize that are still existing since World War II. So that's how the airport looked like in 1945. On the lower part of the picture. Okay, this is
hold on.
No, this is good. This is good. This is actually for those who are listening, who go to PDK. There is a great kids park with a magnolia tree and small control tower, and next to it there is a restaurant called the Downwind Restaurant. So the building right behind those Corsairs, that's where the Downwind Restaurant is. The upper level right now, you have the administration offices of the airport. Right below, there are flight schools, and those white doors are still there, although they're not white anymore. They're obviously aluminum and glass. The control tower is still there, although not shaped as it looks like in this photo. This photo is post-war, about 1950. On the far right, you see the doors of the main hangar, and that hangar right now it's Epps Aviation. Those doors are still there, still moved by hand or with a tug, actually, like back in the days. Those airplanes are FG-1D Corsairs. FG means that they were built by Goodyears. During the war, Chanspot produced the Corsair, but because of the demand, they outsourced the production. So Goodyear actually manufactured in Akron, Ohio, those aircraft. And this is when the base was a reserve base. It was after the war, so the reservists used to, service, I don't know, a weekend a month, 2 weekends a month. So those planes are, very iconic. They served in the war, and they flew, I think, all the way to the late 50s in South American countries. And there is down in Peachtree City, one of the museums I belong to, called Commemorative Air Force, has a Corsair that was actually based at NAS Atlanta in 1950 between 1950 and 1952. So it might be very likely one of the airplanes in that picture.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
What about this one? This was another one.
Yeah, that's 1942. I remember the date because it's actually printed on the bottom corner, right corner of the original photo. That's just essentially all the officers and enlisted personnel of the base. On the far right, you see the doors of the. Essentially, this is the back of the previous picture. That's the ramp behind the hangar shown in the previous picture. Everything you see in the background, it's gone, no longer exists. There are only hangars back there. But that ramp where those folks are sitting on, it still exists to these days, and it's still being used as an airplane ramp.
Wow. Now we got also this one that.
Yeah, these were the first airplanes that were assigned to. They're called end-to-ends or yellow perils, or as more popularly known, Stearman biplane, and they were all yellows, and those were the first biplanes assigned to the base in 1941. Those were trainers, initial trainers for naval aviators, and essentially in front of the airplanes, that's where the current Epps hangar is. In fact, in the full picture, you can still see a piece of the hangar. What's interesting that maybe the viewers cannot see it, but on the side of the airplane there is actually a Donald Duck.
You can't see that on this one.
Running with a parachute, and that, interesting enough, was the first time that Walt Disney designed anything for the military was actually the mascot of NAS Atlanta at Chambly.
That's a better picture.
It's probably too small to see, and some airplanes had it, some didn't. But the interesting fact is that Walt Disney, first time to design anything for the military was for NAS Atlanta at Chambly, which I thought was pretty unique.
Cool. Well, we went through the picture archives that we had. I only had like 4 or 5 samples of those. So, when even if the museum is not set up, I know there's a website that you all have that you set up. It's called the Atlanta Air and Space Museum.org. Will these digitized versions appear somewhere on that website?
Yeah. I think originally I was not planning to put up a dedicated website, but the turnout of the job is so phenomenal that I'm thinking to put up a website just for the archives. In the meantime, very likely I will post some pictures on the website, which they're already available on the Atlanta Air and Space Museums.org website. But I'm inclined towards building a dedicated website just for the NAS Atlanta archives because it's really cool, the stuff that we have been digitizing. Not sure when, but definitely in the upcoming months, along with that book project that I was mentioning to you.
Excellent. You're also a publisher of Warbird News, right? .com?
Yeah. It's a magazine called Warbird Digest. Warbird News is our news outlet, and that's something I started back in 2013 as a hobby. I came from a digital marketing background, and I just wanted to have my own blog. And from a blog, it became more than a blog, and from a blog became a magazine. So it's a labor of love and frustration too, because you're a publisher, that.
Yes.
But it takes work, and sometimes the contributors, are not running on time. They don't deliver the material when they have to, right? And the photos are not really good, so.
Right, there's always a problem. Yes, low res, it's not going to print right.
But in a way, we publish this magazine for the same reason. We are, all of us in this vintage aviation community, ready to preserve the history of aviation, to tell stories of veterans, and to honor for their service. And the magazine and Warbird News does essentially that. I was born in Italy, obviously, but I always been grateful for one. I was gonna mention this real quick. I know you
Sure.
probably running out of time, but I always everyone asks me, why do you do that? You grew up in Italy and blah blah. I said, well, I grew up in Italy, but my grandparents always told me, if it weren't for the American soldiers that came over and liberated Europe, we probably would be speaking German. And I have very sad stories of my grandparents, being in prison camps. And one of my paternal grandfather was what's called a partisan or underground warrior. Essentially, fought against the Nazi and risked his life because he never really approved the fascist regime. So when I came in the U.S., I really found I was looking for a way to kind of pay my tribute and do my part to honor these young Americans that came over and liberated us. And last year, I was fortunate to be part of the D-Day 75th anniversary,
Right.
and that was the experience really of my life. I was actually hired 2 years prior to that by a foundation called Tunizon Foundation to put together this mission. And at the end of the day, we left on May 18th from Oxford, Connecticut, and we flew with 15 C-47 World War II cargo transport from Connecticut all the way to Normandy, including Greenland, including Iceland. We essentially did the same route that the C-47s did 75 years ago. And then on it was phenomenal. On June the 6th, we flew at Omaha Beach over the cemetery in front of President Trump, President Macron, and the presidents of the other allied nations. So it was phenomenal. That was kind of like the apex of my, volunteer career in vintage aviation.
Yeah.
So
No, for sure.
it's really rewarding when you get to meet some of these guys, and I still do know World War II veterans that are still with us, and a couple I'm very close with. I call them every week, and we have great chats, and so it's really, really, really rewarding.
It's so anyone listening to this, I'm gonna in the show notes on the website you'll find a link to the Vimeo video, which is a promo of the documentary, if I understand correctly, of the Normandy flights of that flight. To find out more about the foundation or the museum itself, how can people get involved if they want to reach you to be able to either help in whatever the way they want? How would be the best
Absolutely.
way to reach you?
Atlanta Air and Space Museum.org has a contact us page, so they can send message there. Or as yesterday, actually, we finally opened up all our social media channels under Inspire Aviation Foundation. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I don't have YouTube because I don't have any. Maybe this video will be our first YouTube videos, but under Inspire Aviation Foundation on social media and on the web at Atlanta Air and Space Museum.org. I'm the one managing all that, so I'll be getting all the messages.
Excellent. So those people that want to get involved, certainly reach out to Moreno. And do you want to say anything else before we end the show?
No, well, I want to really thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this project. It's a passion of mine, and that's what I want to do when I grow up. Just run the museum or work at the museum, and doing a phenomenal work. We're still not there, but if everyone wants to get involved, this is very much a grassroots effort. A lot of people get together, business professionals of different backgrounds, and we're really trying to build something unique for the city of Atlanta, but we think for the state of Georgia and the Southeast. So anyone who wants to help, more than welcome.
Excellent. If you want to find out more information, once this is posted on our website, it'll be livinginpeachtree.com that you can visit. Be aware that next issue coming up, the issue after this one. Let's put that out. So this is our last issue that we have, but we're working on the latest issue. That'll be August, September. And one of the articles in there is about Moreno about the foundation, about what's going on there, as well as SOAR, SOAR, which is an organization, a rocketry organization that meets once a month to shoot rockets. I mean, everything from 1-footers to 5-footers. So it's a cool thing. So we're going to be covering them as well, because the second week of August is the National Aviation Week. And so we thought this would be a great time to be able to share some of these stories. So Moreno Aguiari, I appreciate you coming out on this interview. Hang in there with me as we sign off. Everyone,
right.
if you've been listening to the live stream originally, there was some interruption of it. I'm going to be uploading this as the full video on Facebook shortly after the show ends. But thank you for being with us, and look forward to the next podcast. Thanks.